I'm going to talk a little bit, you'll have a little bit about this example in the text, but basically a few years ago, both the cities of Champaign and Urbana decided to extend their bar hours from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. So instead of closing at 1, they would close at 2. Now, there were some citizens that disagreed about this decision. The opponents contended that the extended bar hours would increase drinking-related crimes, like noise violations, drunken driving, vandalism, assault, etc., etc. As a matter of fact, in the cities of Champaign and Urbana, those crimes, being a large college town, those crimes are actually in the police forces pretty much the busiest on Friday and Saturday nights between, at the time when they were discussing this, between the hours like 1 and 3 a.m. or midnight and 3 a.m. And so what happened is that the thought is that by extending the hours, that some people were arguing that they would move the time back so that basically the peak crime period would be 1 to 4 instead of midnight to 3. Some people argued that it would just increase it, that people who weren't drunk by 1 would be drunk and violent by 2, and so you would actually increase it overall, and the violence would increase in total, and that it would go longer. And then other people thought that that by being in a bar, that instead of going to house parties, that there would be people who have large financial interests in regulating this, and they would keep from over-serving people, not serving minors, or at least police would be able to walk through more freely. They would know where the drinking was going on, and it would be more closely regulated and would allow for fewer incidents that would cause violence and cause problems, and would actually decrease the overall violence. But the whole point of why I bring this up is that there were a lot of different factual, those are all future-oriented factual issues, and the question is which are true and which are false. Now, a lot of people would say, as far as we go with values, that we have a value argument here, that would that by extending bar hours, we're basically putting the interest of bars being open later and making more money, etc., over the interests of student safety or public safety, and that's just wrong, and that it's going to cause all these problems. Well, in the end, I think what happens is that most of us would agree on this, that if you extend the bar hours and it causes an increase in crime, that it's a bad idea. And most everybody would agree that if you extend the bar hours and it decreases crime, that it actually decreases it, that's probably a good thing. As a matter of fact, as an example of this, probably been close to 15 or 20 years ago now, the city of Carbondale had several pretty significant Halloween riots, and then riots occasionally throughout the year. And the reason is that all the bars closed, I believe, at 1 or 2, and I don't remember what the time was exactly, but they all closed at the same time. And they were compacted along one street, is the way it's been described to me. And so people would spill out into the street, they'd be forced out of the bar, and then you'd have a bunch of drunk people standing in the middle of the street, a bunch of drunken college students, and they would thus become violent, or I wouldn't say, but they would start acting silly, and next thing you know, the violence would escalate, and there was significant issues. And Halloween was always a big time because people knew that it was a pretty raucous area, and so people from all over would come in, and people who wanted to be and get up to no good. So what happens is they extended the bar hours to like 4 or 5 in the morning, and the reason why they did this was that as a result, most people wouldn't just drink until the bar closed. They would go home at some point. But then people were moderating it themselves, and there was never this spill-out effect into the street, and they thus eliminated part of the problem. Now, they also closed the campus for Halloween and did some other things that, also helped with that problem, with the Halloween-specific problem. But that's how they handled it. And so what happens is that extending bar hours doesn't necessarily mean you're going to extend violence or anything else. And so what happens is we come back to this example with the bar hours, is that, we might think we have a value difference of, whether or not you believe drinking is good, whether or not the hours should be extended, should people be drinking more, etc., etc., etc. But in fact, what we really have is a factual disagreement over what will be the effects of a bar hour change on the city of Champaign and Urbana. Now, in the end, if it doesn't make any difference, then probably go ahead and extend it. If it increases crime, it's probably bad. Most people would agree or disagree. But for the most part, people will agree on these things. That when you get to the values, that a lot of our arguments are not value arguments, they're factual arguments. They're issues with what you think will be the conclusion or the result of this thing, more than what is than actually disagreeing about the values.